Good morning. Happy Tuesday, the 25th of October. We're on the module DD211, Understanding Politics, Ideas and Institutions in the Modern World. On influence youth today, mature teenagers, young adults, mature adults, retired adults, keeping methodical in everyday life practice, keeping busy, need something to do every day. We're on module module DD211. When we read, we like to record our reading, and we also need to reference our reading so we can find out where we left off. The book was made at Open University, Walton Hall, Milton Keynes, first published in 2015, second edition 2002. We're on the page 165. We can do about an hour's reading. Natural Equality, page 165, chapter 6 of the module. Let's get a pen ready. So, natural equality. The idea of natural equality contends that all humans are fundamentally similar and that no one should be discriminated against or privileged above another because of some particular inherited individual or group characteristic. It's all about diverse and ability nowadays, isn't it? Sex, race, gender, and so forth. Anyway, Martin Luther King celebrated speech to 250,000 people at the Civil Rights March on Washington, D.C., 1963. One of the largest political rallies in US history makes a powerful case for natural equality, said. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold the truths to be with self-evident. We hold the truth to be self-evident that all men are created equal. That one day, right there in Alabama, like little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. The king uses the imagery of a family to insist that we are marked fundamentally by our similarities rather than our differences. He argues, in essence, that we belong together. He explicitly draws attention to differences of skin colour in order to reject this as a basis for differential treatment in society. Clearly, as King recognises, individuals and groups can find themselves socially marked by differences. These differences matter in terms of how individuals and groups are treated and what capacities, potentials, and needs they are considered to have or not have. These differences often embedded inequalities that are sustained over time, which can lead to the kind of racist society that King fought so passionately against. In his speech, there is a tension between descriptions of the existing world people are born into, the world as it is at present, and the vision of a world that could be, the world he believes we should be born into. Important differences don't exist. You love football, and I love reading novels. You are gregarious, and I prefer time to myself. You support charity work, and I think that government should support the needy. But rather that differences such as skin colour, gender, and sexual orientation should not be considered morally or politically significant, King's vision is that we are all worthy of recognition from our fellow human beings for our equal humanity, and all entitled to fair and equal treatment in the public realm. The idea that there is a natural equality and that we are born equal despite the different situations into which we are born is now seen as a normal in many societies. Equality may be seen as having moved beyond politics in a sense. You might struggle to come up with examples of institutions or positions of political power or influence that defend their legitimacy purely on the grounds of the natural superiority of inferiority of particular groups or individuals. For instance, most politicians will claim to have achieved their positions based on merit rather than who their parents happen to be. The British royal family might spring to mind as a notable exception to this rule, but I even hear the arguments for its continuation as a political institution are often framed on some rational other than the idea of a natural order or hierarchy. The claimed economic benefits that the royal family brings to the UK, this symbolic position as representative of modern family values, the particular stature and abilities of the current monarch, or perhaps the less overtly political nature of office compared to which a presidential system might involve, are page 166, are all drawn on to justify the continuation instead. The idea of natural superiority and God ordained order as the basis for a political system has in many parts of the world have been given up in favour of democratic political values. In contrast to a modern understanding of natural equality, in medieval Europe, roughly from the 5th or the 15th century, most people knew their place in society and believed that they were in that place for a reason. It was thought that a natural, divinely ordained hierarchy explained each person's position in the chain of being, an understanding embodied in the Christian hymn, all things bright and beautiful. The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them high or lowly, and ordered their state. Medieval people saw inequality as natural, as fundamental to God's plan for his creation. But this powerfully dominant understanding of the world was gradually and fundamentally challenged by the advent of the Age of Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was an intellectual and philosophical movement that sought to apply for a reason rather than movement accompanied the rise of the Industrial Revolution in Western Europe from the 17th and 18th centuries onwards. Ideas of reasons and securely rationally become hugely influential, making the beginning of what is commonly understood to be the modern age. The movement developed in many ideas that still influence our societies today and has helped discredit the idea of a natural order and a natural hierarchy in many societies. At the end of the 17th century, the philosopher and political reformer John Locke formulated a claim to natural rights. At this early stage of enlightenment, Locke didn't look beyond religion as the source of authority in the world, but instead challenged the traditional view that the monarch was God's anointed ruler on earth. Known as the divine right of kings, Locke argued that all people are entitled to rights delivered directly from God, and that the earthly rulers should not interfere with these rights. In particular, the king should not interfere with a person's life, liberty, and estate. Locke, 1960, page 323. Estate refers to a person's property entitlements and obligations. Locke argued that being by nature, all free, equal, and independent, not one can be put of his estate and subject to the political power of another without his own consent. Locke, 1960, page 330. Locke's ideas become central to the liberal political tradition. A century later, these ideas were very influential upon the framers of the US Constitution. Page 168, equality. Locke makes use of the idea of social contract and imagine the idea that people come together and consent to be governed in return for guaranteed protection of their rights. He imagines what life would be like without a government, in a state of nature whereby men would be free to take ownership of property, as God had provided this for man to use. He acknowledges that government may be needed to help ensure that these natural rights are protected. In order to do this, we must hand over some of these rights to the government in a social contract, such as the right to be the judge in your own case. But this must be a minimal form of government, and this government must not violate your natural rights. For Locke, therefore, the role of government is strictly limited to the protection of these individual rights of life, liberty, and state. It should be said that Locke means by equality of natural rights is distinct from the kind of rights that we might imagine this kind of concept would involve today. For instance, Locke sees his rights as largely attaching to men and further to men with interest in property in particular. Women were seen as belonging to the private sphere of family and were not assumed to require the same rights as propertied men. Nevertheless, this information of rights marks an important step on the path to the contemporary meanings of equality, as these ideas have proved very influential. You can, for instance, hear echoes of Locke in Article 3 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of person. United Nations, 1948. The idea of government as upholder and enforcer of natural rights is only one reading of qualities as something that is fundamentally to being human. Albeit a very important one, in the late 18th century, a different strand of liberal thinking known as utilitarianism drew similar conclusions regarding a fundamental equality of human, but arrived at them from a different starting point. To the utilitarian philosopher Jenny Bentham, Locke's ideas of natural rights was nonsense upon stilts. Bentham, 1792. For Bentham, Locke's device of the state of nature wasn't needed to explain the nature of a good political society. Instead, Bentham proposed that what is common to all of us in an equal capacity to feel pleasure and suffer pain. He made this argument based purely on observations of human behaviour rather than appeal to imagined explanations. To this, Bentham added the claim that all humans are potentially rational beings who will seek to maximise pleasure and minimise pain. Good morning, everybody. Bentham argued that political society should reflect this point of view and look to maximise the good in any question, rather than appeal to some fixed concept of absolute, inviolable natural rights, for instance, associated with Locke. It may be that rights are useful. Indeed, Bentham argued that they probably were, but ultimately he held that rights don't have a deeper underlying significance, as Locke had maintained. Bentham contended that, in proportion to the want of happiness resulting from want of rights, a reason exists for wishing that there were such things as rights, but reasons for wishing there were such things as rights are not rights. A reason for wishing that certain rights were established is not that right. Want is not supply. Hunger is not bread. That which has no existence cannot be destroyed. That which cannot be destroyed cannot require anything to preserve it from destruction. Natural rights is simple nonsense. Natural and imprescriptible rights. Theoretical nonsense. Nonsense upon stilts. Thus, Bentham believed that all humans are entitled to an equal consideration of their interest based on an equal capacity of experience, pleasure, and pain, rather than a divinely ordained command. The idea that there is a fundamental natural equality is perhaps less controversial than any other understanding of equality set out below. It is worth recognising, though, that the concept of natural equality is a political idea, since it makes claims regarding the importance of individual rights over and against a political community. The concept of natural equality, in this way, was a socially constructed idea that seeks to establish the basis upon which a political society should be founded. Natural equality is a claim being made and is not simply self-evident. Hello, Sammy boy. How you doing? Nice to see you. Been a long time. God bless, my friend. I hope you're well. Nice to see you, Sam. Page 170. Equality. Formal equality of rights and entitlements. The argument for a formal equality based on rights and entitlements is the more contemporary liberal understanding of equality. This is that the idea that everyone should be treated equally before the law, and that any entitlements that are afforded to some individuals should be granted equally to all. Formal equality is normally held to include equal citizenship rights and equal rights to participate in the institution of society. In this meaning, a person's characteristics such as gender, race, ethnicity, and class are not grounds for different treatment by laws or public officials. Formal equality can be seen as an institutional legal scaffolding that the state provides to ensure that each individual rights are equally protected. The idea of citizenship is central to this meaning since, in order to generate these rights and entitlements, an individual has to be recognised as an equal member of the political community. This membership is conferred by the state, but once this is established, the citizen then holds the same rights and entitlements as all other citizens. The claims of liberal theorists like John Locke regarding natural rights in terms of being born equal are linked to the notion of a formalised equality codified in rights and entitlements and embodied in practices such as equality before the law and one person, one vote. The Post Enlightenment Act of writing down equal rights in law is the important shift from the first meaning natural to the second meaning formal of equality as a consequence of this process of codifying and legalising. It is now seen as a job of government to state what equality means in a society and to update the meaning over time as values change, rather than simply being natural or God given. Equality is now defined as implemented by government. The moves towards civil partnerships and same sex marriage in many countries is a case in point, which we will be discussed below. Among the most well known statements linking to the notion of natural rights to equal entitlements under the law of is the US Declaration of Independence. It states, "We hold this truth to be self evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with a certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." US Declaration of Independence, 1766. The founding fathers of the United States were appealing to the kind of world that would be open to all the independent nation, freed from the tyranny of hierarchical rule symbolised in the British monarchy. Equality was to be manifested is unalienable rights that he has been endowed by their Creator, and that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Natural rights of John Locke are right large here, transmitted through which influence upon Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence. However, neither Locke nor the founding fathers intended that equality would apply to women or non-property groups in the same way that it might apply to the property men. For instance, Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. Even though this seems contradictory to our contemporary understanding of equality, in the US Constitution, equality focuses on the eradication of privileged treatment before the law, especially with regards to property rights. Men are to be left largely free to pursue their goals for themselves, underpinned by a social contract, and the US Constitution are founded upon strictly limited government and consent on the part of the people. Formal equality in practice. Remarkable shift of opinion on the issue of gay equality that has occurred in many societies, such as Western Europe and North America, during recent decades, underscores of the persuasiveness and the success of the second Formal meaning of equality, yet whilst the originators of these ideas, such as Locke and Jefferson, would not have emphasised their application in terms of gay marriage. It's precisely this type of legal argument that has helped activists to achieve formal equality in the area in many countries. The special status that law traditionally granted to married heterosexual couples, such as tax breaks, inheritance rights, and most importantly, social recognition, is something that is being fought over on the grounds of unequal treatment by advocates of gay equality with ongoing success in many parts of the world. Whilst claims for formal equality of rights and entitlements were established in principle in many Western societies in the period after the Second World War, symbolised by the UN Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, these principles were not generally understood in terms of sexual orientation. Indeed, such as this is indicative of the scale of change that has come about. For instance, an idea such as sexual orientation would have not been understood until relatively recently, let alone viewed as something that would deserve an equality of rights. Indeed, while restrictions against sexual rights continue in some parts of the world, in the UK, the Equality Act 2010 has made discrimination or unfair treatment based on certain personal characteristics such as sexual orientation a criminal offence. Equal rights to vote is another area where the formal meaning of equality has an impact. Had an impact. For the early 19th century, the universal suffrage movement used arguments of this kind to make a case for democratic political equality, enshrined in the principle of one person, one vote. Whilst a relatively uncontroversial demand in much of the world today, it should be remembered that this form of equality is a relatively recent phenomenon, and that this was an intensely political demand on the part of reformers. For instance, in apartheid South Africa, the principle of one person, one vote only applied to citizens classified as belonging to certain races. It was not until 1994, as many struggles that universal suffrage applied so that all citizens, black and white, could cast their own votes. Indeed, universal suffrage is a fairly recent phenomenon in the Western liberal democracies. The right to vote for women in the UK was not equal to that of men until 1928. While women were only given fully equal voting rights in Switzerland as late as 1971. In other situations, some people were entitled to added votes in line with their status. So graduates of some elite universities in the UK were allocated an extra vote for the university MP as late as 1950. A privileged status intended to reflect the supposedly unique contribution of their learned wisdom. Today, the idea of giving a second vote to certain graduates might seem absurd. Yet 1950 is not really so very long ago. A key fact of this meaning of equality as something formal is the idea of citizenship. Citizenship pertains to individuals within a political community wherein everyone's rights and entitlements are protected equally. So as long as they are members of that community, the idea of the rational citizen with inalienable legal and political rights is now broadly and firmly fixed within the public imagination, particularly within economically advanced liberal democratic nations. This formal equality of rights and entitlements lays out the boundaries between the state and the individual, and many conservative and liberal advocates of formal equality argue that this should be the limit of equality. They argue that the state should act as a guarantor of these rights and entitlements, but not interfere otherwise in life for individuals within society. As we will see later in this chapter, advocates of equality of opportunity and equality of outcome argue for a greater role for government intervention. This meaning of equality has had a profound political impact upon both the institutions of government and the lived experiences of individuals within society, as seen in examples of voting rights and gay marriage. The overarching political impact of the idea of formal equality is evident in the general consensus within society regarding the principle of equality under the law. It has been so successful as an idea that the core claim of formal equality that citizens should be treated as equals by under the state. It is largely agreed across the range of political ideologies. Equal of opportunity. According to UK-based Equality and Human Rights Commission, equality means ensuring that every individual has an equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and talents. The idea of equalities as equality of opportunities puts forward the view that something extra beyond natural and formal equality is needed to bring about the meaningful equality. The argument here is that the governments need to act, not just to protect the rights, but in some positive manner to overcome established and ingrained inequalities, since they won't just melt away by themselves. Proponents of equality of opportunity start from the view that everyone should have equal access to life chances. Advocates of this view would hold that pursuing these chances, there should be no barriers to entry caused by differences in social status, race, religion, gender, and other characteristics that are not morally and politically significant. For instance, contemporary feminist critics of formal equalities draw attention to the failure of deliver equality of representation for women in politics, equal pay for equal work between the sexes, and the end of the sexist culture of society that argue what the political action is needed to overcome such barriers. Non-discrimination. The analogy of the competitive race is often called upon to illustrate the idea that fair and legitimate results can be product of an equal starting position. The outcomes may be very different from different participants. Some will finish first and some one last. And that isn't unfair, but that all our participants have equal opportunity to their entry is a crucial factor. It allows that equal of opportunity rests on all principles of non-discrimination. Non-discrimination can be understood in two ways. It might be seen as a stating to everyone who comes to the race starting line can be entered for the race. Everyone will have a chance to start the race, regardless of gender, class, ethnicity, disability, etc. Fair treatment here simply involves equality to enter. But a second form of non-discrimination argues that more deliberate intervention may be required in order to address barriers to going to the starting line in the first place. Some people might not have money to buy proper running shoes because of structural barrier, such as class position. But if the government was able to ensure that all the starters to the race had an equal start in terms of running shoes, then the equal access would be more meaningful. The strength of this second form of non-discrimination is that it tackles obstacles to going to the starting line. The weakness is that such intervention might involve treating certain disadvantaged people groups preferentially, sometimes called positive discrimination, and that is controversial. These descriptions draw on a distinction between equity and equality, whereas equality is about treating everyone the same, regardless of their identity or need. The equity is about giving more support to those who need it, so that everyone has the same opportunities. Social Change UK 2019, for instance, by providing more support for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Among proponents of equality of opportunity, then, there are a range of views regarding what equal opportunity is and how it is to be achieved. Some encourage changes in cultural attitudes, others direct legal intervention, such as legislation like Equality Act 2010. The recognition of obstacles reflects a third, more interventionist approach to try bring equality about in practice, for instance. By taking positive action like using quotas to ensure that jobs candidates or prospective MPs from underrepresented groups are considered alongside better qualified overrepresented candidates from other more advantaged group backgrounds. So which opportunities should be made more equal? Should I insist on the opportunity to go to university even though I wasn't able to stay on a school for A-levels because the family needed my income for a job? I'm not confident I can understand the work. Should I insist on the opportunity to train as a ballet dancer even though I don't have the technical ability and am not prepared to put the work in? This question can be addressed through the distinction between non-legitimate inequalities and legitimate inequalities. Non-legitimate inequalities are the outcome of differential social treatment on the basis of class, gender, ethnic group. Legitimate inequality result from unequal merit. I just didn't do well enough in the exam. Talent, I'm not as clever as maths, or willingness to work. I watched Netflix instead of studying. Inequality is seen as justified in the second case, beyond everyone had a fair start. This argument that everyone deserves a fair start seems reasonable. Surely it is unreasonable for someone, particularly a child, to have an unfair start in life. Unfairness goes against most modern sensibilities. Children aren't responsible for the world they find themselves born into and can't be held accountable for the good or the poor decisions of their parents and grandparents. Page 176. Yet the weight of evidence suggests that a child's future opportunities in life will be closely tied to the opportunities of preceding generations, and that often it can be a person's postcode or social class background that determines their chances in life. Rather than their individual talents and aspirations, the example of access to higher education illustrates some of the problems that proponents of equality of opportunity to seek to rectify. In 2020, the Office for Students, University Watchdog, found that people from the most affluent areas of England are more than 6 times as likely than those from disadvantaged areas to attend selective universities such as Oxford, Cambridge, and members of the Russell Group, Office for Students. A figure that has barely improved in a decade. It is also observed a regional aspect to the equality gap. In London, 54% of young people go to university, but in North East England, it is 39%. Office for Students 2020. The Watchdog has ruled that these access groups gap must be halved in 5 years. Oxford and Cambridge are belatedly enacting measures to improve their intake of students from deprived and underrepresented backgrounds. Willock, Clark and Ball, 2021. From this data, it seems that it is best advised if you want to get into the most prestigious universities in the UK. It is to choose your parents carefully for the factors outside of your control that shape your life chances as definitive despite the weight of evidence. One famous elite university contends that admission to Oxford is based purely on the aptitude and potential for those chosen course, without regard to school type or any other factor. University statement quoted in Pavel and Adams 2013. What this distinction between the two quotations suggests that whilst there may be a formal quota of rights and entitlements in the UK university system, in theory anyone can apply and be treated equally, with places being allocated to the most qualified candidates. This is not translated into a meaningful equality in practice, particularly in the more elite institutions. The most telling figure here is not necessarily the scale of difference in access between children in rich families and those from poor families, and this is widely known. It is that the situation has not been improving over time. As the evidence makes clear, things haven't changed substantially over the last decade. This challenges a central claim of advocates of formal equality, the claim that with the right rules in the place things will gradually improve and that imagined group and equalities will diminish over time. Luck, egalitarianism, page 177. Yeah, how you doing there, Mark? Nice to see you. Yes, I'm going to have to pop in to see Drama Rock very shortly, my friend. Hope you're doing well, Mark. Sorry, I didn't see your text. I was too busy getting in deep stuff with my studying. I hope you're well. Luck, egalitarianism. So far, we've considered equality of opportunity in terms of fair access, non-discrimination, and legitimate and non-legitimate inequalities. Another prominent approach to equality of opportunity, which builds on these ideas, centres on the idea of luck, egalitarianism. Egalitarianism is simply the idea that should all be treated equally. This approach is associated with the work of Roland Dworkin, a prominent political philosopher, in balancing those aspects of a person's life for which they are responsible against those for which they are not. Like egalitarianism seeks to neutralize the effects of chance on individual lives. For instance, your life expectancy, future educational achievement, and employment chances are demonstrated consistently to be closely correlated with the area, even the district of the town that you were born into. Like egalitarianism generally seeks to minimize the effects of these unfair advantages conferred often by the simple fact of who your parents happen to be. Since these advantages tend to exist even in societies that follow principles of rewarding effort and talent. This argument is starkly demonstrated in the statistics of universities. The entrance above. Like egalitarians might suggest remedies such as setting quotas for university entrance, whereby universities would be instructed by the government to enrol a more representative sample of the population. To include a certain percentage from state schools, perhaps. They might also make a case for preferential treatment for uncertain groups, whereby students from the poorest backgrounds would be awarded extra grants to encourage them to study at university. Such measures are evidently differential, resulting in unequal treatment. But the argument is that they are justified on grounds of equality of opportunity. Some forms of non-discrimination share with luck egalitarianism. A sense of sustained political action is needed to bring about systemic structural changes in society to address the cause of inequality. For instance, positive action in the form of legal mandated quotas to force change in selection process within business and institutions to ensure that some disadvantaged candidates for a job are shortlisted is one approach to bring about a more equal society in terms. Equality of opportunity demands systemic changes to the process of social change and the institutions of politics, health, education, and work. Where inequality is ingrained, it is beyond the capacity of individuals to be able to secure equality for themselves by their own actions alone. And therefore, explicit government intervention is required. Relational equality, a further approach, seeks to engender a greater quality of opportunity, argues that what matters about equality is not some external measures but their comparison with your peers. This approach is associated with the work of Elizabeth Anderson, a political philosopher. According to this view, egalitarianism is the best understood not as eliminating the effects of luck by intervening with remedial measures, but as achieving relations of equality between individuals by ending oppression, domination, and exploitation. The relational or social equality of idea holds that the society of equals should be based on mutual respect and self-respect, and thereby seeks to overcome hierarchical divisions based on class, gender, disability, and so on. Remedying inequality involves making changes to social institutions and cultural norms, the structures which support objectionable social hierarchies. Remedies for inequalities in our university entrance example, for instance, might translate into universities sending representatives into schools in poorer areas in order to encourage children from non-traditional backgrounds to apply. They might also look to encourage universities to change the culture in their institutions from those that emphasise the lifestyles of the elite to those that reflect more common lifestyles. It might also be that there is an expectation regarding what university students look like and that cultural expectations on that part admission tutors need to be adjusted. For instance, at present, even when state school children have the same grade as their privately educated counterparts, they still have a much lower chance of being allocated a university place at the elite universities. Evidence suggests that black and ethnic minority students are less likely to be awarded places at some of the most prestigious universities, whatever school background they have, even with the same grade profile as their white counterparts. Capability to function. The last approach to equality of opportunity will look at their focus of work of the Amartya Sen. An economist, Sen argues that equality of opportunity requires even more complex action in order to be achieved. He advocates that we measure equality not according to individual access to resources or welfare benefits, but according to their capability to function. Differently positioned, people will require different things in order to develop their capabilities for taking up opportunity for well-being and human flourishing. Human diversity is a key factor in thinking about equality. Capability to be thriving person means being able to achieve nourishment, health, and a decent lifespan, self-respect, and so on. But there's no single core good that defines capability, and the bundle of capability differs from one person to another, from one society to another. Sen's theory has become influential in the field of development economics, for instance, in UN policymaking, encouraging a move away from the measurement of poverty into terms of a person's amount of income to a measurement in terms of basic capabilities to function in society. In our example case, university admissions officers would need to take into account a bundle of consideration that look to balance a range of factors pertaining to the individual applicant rather than bluntly applying exam grade criteria or simply allocating place to deprive social class in the form of quotas, according to Sen's theory. A much more explicit case-by-case approach is called for that to target some ingrained group inequalities, but also looks at a range of other factors that may have an impact. Having considered a range of meanings of equality of opportunity, we can see that political implications of equality of opportunity will be very dependent on the type of equality of opportunity that is identified. Those argue for cultural change in attitudes might be content with a hands-off approach from government, one that simply encourages institutions to adopt practices that can make more inclusive and more productive of mutual esteem between different groups of society. Non-discrimination measures call for lesser and greater government intervention. Advocates of luck. Egalitarianism might look for stronger measures that seek to enforce equality, such as mandated quotas, for instance. Man quotas for entrance to universities from different social classes, a capability to function approach as advocated by Sen. It might look at a state range of factors into account of a more flexible and targeted basis, whichever has the favoured position. It is clear that the modern egalitarianism idea of society, wherein individual effort and ability for the soul, measures of success and status is a fundamentally political idea. Equality of opportunity seeks to bring equality into being in a meaningful way. This approach is aimed at getting everyone to the starting line in time for the starter's pistol to fire. And there's no assumption here at the equal opportunity which will lead to an equal outcome afterwards. Indeed, supporters of equality of opportunity often use a concept to justify an inequality and outcome. Even quite substantial inequality to advocates of inequality of opportunity, an unequal outcome is fine, even good, as long as we all start from the same place. Equality of outcome. Equality of outcome seeks to shift the argument away from everyone starting with the same point in a competition from status and resources to everyone actually finishing the race together. This marks a radical move away from a competitive model of society towards one where cooperation and common interests take precedence. An analysis of human nature as social and cooperative leads to advocates of equality of outcome to argue the more equal distribution of income, wealth and other social goods. For those who hold this view, the material products of society should be shared or more equally. This fourth meaning of equality is endorsed largely but not exclusively by those on the left of the political spectrum, such as socialists and communists. Opponents of equality of outcome argue that social and economic equality should be eradicated as far as is possible. The equality of outcome argument takes two forms: a hard vision that advocates the abolition of private property in order to bring about the absolute equality of outcome, a soft version that focuses on addressing economic equality. It would be fair to say that equality of outcome approaches have generally been out of favour in much of the world since the 1980s. But sure, the collapse of the most communist regimes advocating the hard version of equality of outcome. This collapse happened to accompany the rise of neoliberal politics in Western Europe, the US that challenged the welfare state policies put forward by the advocates of the soft version of equality of outcome. However, there remains an extensive welfare system in place of many Western European societies that supports the soft version of equality of outcome. There are still some significant political movements and systems, particularly in South America, that explicitly seeks to move towards greater equality of outcome along the lines of a hard version by seeking to abolish private property. What seems clear from the evidence is that the issue of inequality will not be resolved if the only approach is one based on formal equality of rights. I'll keep that there, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to come back to that reading at a later date. Page 182. Just want to say thank you to everyone tuning in today. I really am overwhelmed for everyone coming in, supporting the show. It means so much to me. I had a wonderful day yesterday. I went into London, I went into Richmond, Embankment, and then we went to Parliament. I really wasn't feeling great at all. I really was ill, but I managed it. It wasn't a bad day out. I was hoping to see Rishi Sunak. Bumped into Angela Rayner inside Westminster Hall, and Michael Gove, Theresa May, and Diana Abbott, amongst other politicians inside the chamber. It was a phenomenal day out. I just want to say thank you all so much for tuning in. Please subscribe to Proclamation News and Gatherance. I've got a book out called The Mind